everyone. This is Kathy Mason from MasonWorks Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone with my friend Bill Douglas, although he has William there. Are we going to be formal today?
Well, my new second edition of the Gospel of Science is William Douglas, so I thought I'd start using William.
Okay.
But call me Bill, please.
Well, formal names were only used when you were in big trouble, Kat.
Well, the book has got a big message, so I thought I should use my big name.
Yeah. Okay. So do we want to start there and then go to World Tai Chi and Qigong Day?
We can play it however you want to, Kathy. I'll get into all that stuff. Yeah.
Well, I just want people to get an idea about you because you are on a mission to really make the world a different place and to empower humans to use their capacity to create heaven on earth any way they can. And so you go through the physical, the mental, the spiritual. So I just want, you are a great resource as far as I can see for my audience to know more about how to connect with themselves and have a joyful life. We weren't meant to suffer. Mm-hmm. We forgot this is a game, and and we can play full out instead of play small and play victim. So, and right now with the energies and the way that the world has been, it's people that are watching the news and that are being influenced by the news, whether or not they're watching it, but they're influenced by it heavily and are in a fear state, don't know what you know. So maybe we could start there. If you wouldn't mind, we could talk a little bit about your journey to this realization that this was through Qigong and Tai Chi, really through Tai Chi, that you could come to and bring others to this state of mastery. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I don't know your personal story either.
Yeah, well, one thing I always kind of flinch at the idea of mastery because I've been at this for 45 years and I still haven't mastered it yet. So. But
well, I want to give people some hope. Well, no, it's a journey. If by the time you master, you croak. So, but rotate. Next one. But I mean, this whole game was set up that you forget your past lives, you forget all the mastery you had in the last lifetime, and then it's the rediscovering. So I just wondered how you I mean, you grew up probably just going to regular school and
well, I grew up in western Kansas, in Ellis, Kansas, and it was a population of 2,000.
Oh my God.
And our claim to fame was that Walter P. Chrysler's boyhood home was there. So they had a house, and that was the museum. And, one movie theater, a drugstore, stuff like that. And so this journey that I've been on has just been trying to figure out how to get through my life, just like everybody else is, trying to do the same thing. And that journey just led to extraordinary places. And what happened was, I actually, I don't know whether you want to get into this or not, but I had an extraordinary consciousness experience when I was really young, like about 6-7 years old.
Sure.
You want to hear about that?
Sure.
Yeah. So
basically, that's what everyone's waking up right now. They're gonna, if they haven't had one, or they haven't been in the hospital and be resuscitated, something's going to happen that's going to shift their consciousness to where you are or on the journey to that. So,
on the journey. Yeah. And I agree with you. I think that everybody's having extraordinary consciousness experiences all the time. And science is starting to study that. And that's what this whole journey has brought me to is coming to terms with the fact that science validates so many of these concepts that you've just been talking about, Kathy. And that's so exciting right now. But for me, it started at a really early age, and I didn't really know what was going on at the time. But I had this extraordinary experience, and I don't want to paint it as necessarily like a certain religion's experience or anything like that, because I don't. When you have larger consciousness experiences, they're really undefined. It's not they're not linear or anything like that. But I think that the imagery that we get when we have them it's just iconic imagery that resonates with us. So, for example, with myself, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I was in Sunday school and Bible school in the Lutheran Church in Ellis, Kansas. And anyway, one night I had this extraordinary consciousness experience. And it was right at a time when we were going through a lot, because my father was a World War II veteran. He had post-traumatic stress disorder. He was in frontline combat for like 3 years. And so there was a lot of turmoil going on with us and everything. And then one night I just had this extraordinary experience. And like I said, I was a little kid, like maybe 6, 7, something like that. And I woke up. I was in bed with my mom and my dog. we owned a small motel, and we just slept in the office so that if somebody would come in at night, they'd hear the bell and get up out of bed and go check them in. And so anyway, I slept with my mom and my dog, and I woke up, and there was this angel. And again, don't get me wrong. If you're agnostic or atheist or whatever, don't reject this immediately, because I don't know what it was. All I know was that it appeared to me, a 6 or 7 year old Sunday school Bible school student, Lutheran Bible school student, as an angel, because that would be what would capture my attention and something to resonate with. And so anyway, so it picked me up. And it flew me. Now, before I get into this more, realize extraordinary consciousness experiences happen all the time. When we have synchronicities, we'll think of somebody and then the phone will ring and it'll be them. These kind of things happen to all the time. But this was just one that I remembered, and I'll tell you why in a second. So anyway, this angel, it was trying to beckon me out of the bed. And I didn't want to go. I just shrunk back in between my mom and my dog. And then all of a sudden, I just felt myself being pulled out of the bed, and I was trying to stop it. And so I was reaching out and trying to grab my mom and my dog, and my hands just went right through them. So I realized now, as an adult, I was having an out-of-body experience. I didn't have the awareness to turn around and look and see that my physical body was still laying there asleep, but I'm sure it would have been if I would have turned around and looked at it. So anyway, this angel, it picks me up, and all of a sudden we're just floating up in the air, up in the sky above our small town. And I'd never seen an aerial view of anything, I'd never been in an airplane. And anyway, so we're flying across town, and it was winter. It was a clear winter night, big moon. And but I remember I wasn't cold. I felt very comfortable. And so we're flying across town, and it lands me in this little brick alleyway right in between our Sunday school and the church. And then what it did was it started teaching me how to breathe. It was giving me breathing lessons. And then it would show me that whenever I would exhale, if I would just let go of everything that I am, everything that I think, just everything. And I can't tell you how it taught me this, but it was teaching me on some level. And I realized that when I sighed, if I just let go of everything, then I would start to lift up off the bricks. And I started getting more and more adept at this. And by the time this lesson was over, I was flying up towards the moon and coming back down in between these buildings, doing these big loop-de-loops. And it was just an exquisite experience. And then I remember there was kind of like this look of satisfaction on the face of this nebulous kind of angelic creature. And then it was over. And the next thing I remembered was the next morning I woke up, and I was so excited because I was going to run to school and I was going to teach all the kids how to fly. And so I grabbed my lunch sack and I'm running down the alley and I'm taking this big breath and jumping up in the air. And then I come splat down in a mud puddle. I couldn't fly, right? But what I realized about 20 years later was that it wasn't about physical flying. It was about consciousness expansion and liberation and all that kind of stuff. And what happened was about 20 years later, I was going through a lot of stress. And, I was still trying to work out, the PTSD stuff that I went through with my father. And we all have these things. We all have these things in our cellular or energetic structure from the past. And so these tools, I started looking for a way to start to let that stuff go, so that I could move on with my life. I had, young kids, and I didn't want to respond to them the same way that I had been responded to by my father, with the PTSD. He was a great human being. Don't get me wrong, but he had, when you go through a war, you never recover. And and that doesn't mean that you can't still have a beautiful life or anything like that. But anyway, so I was looking for answers, and I ended up finding a psychologist. And I just picked him out of the phone book, and I was in Southern California, so there was a thick stack of psychologists. And I just happened to pick this one guy, and I remember his first name was Duke. And anyway, what I didn't realize at the time was that his day job was at the VA, working with Vietnam veterans with they didn't call it PTSD back then, I don't think, but it was the same thing. And so anyway, I lucked out by picking him because he knew what I was dealing with. He figured out what I was dealing with, and he really helped me through it. And at one point he said, Bill, I think you should consider mind-body practices. And so then I found a Tai Chi meditation class. And I told my wife, I said, you want to go do this with me? And she said, yeah, I'll do it, because she's from Hong Kong. And so her mom had done Tai Chi with her when she was a little girl. And so we both took it together. She didn't stick with it, she just did it when she was a little girl. And so we both took it together. And that first class, it was, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know about any of this kind of stuff. It was all strange to me, because it was in Southern California. We just moved there from Western Kansas when my wife graduated from college. And so I'd never been exposed to these things, although I had, but I didn't realize it at the time. And so anyway, what the teacher did in that class was she taught us Qigong, and Qigong means breathing exercise. Just like the angel was teaching me the breathing exercise, right? And then over the years, I realized that all the major meditative practices that are validated by massive amounts of science, meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, and mindfulness, breath is at the core of all these things. Feeling your breath, feeling your center, and letting go of thinking about it, but just feeling it. And so anyway, when I had this really beautiful experience that first night in class, because I didn't know what to expect, and so my mind was wide open. And so then I just, I dropped out. I didn't stick with it. It's hard to stick with new life habits, but I just knew that I felt so much better that night after I did it, and it kept bringing me back to it. And then eventually that reminded me of that experience that I'd had when I was a really young kid. And so I started doing this stuff, and it was really helping me, mentally and emotionally. And, but I never thought of it as like a physical health practice. For me, it was mental and emotional. And then it became kind of spiritual, not in a dogmatic religious way, although it did validate a lot of the things that I had been exposed to in Sunday school and Bible school. It made a lot of sense of them, because like the idea of forgiveness, I always was kind of raised, and I think most people who grew up in the church, we look at forgiveness as it's like a favor that we're doing for that person that, wronged us or hurt us or whatever. But as I was practicing mind-body practices, I started to realize, no, it's not about that at all. It's giving ourselves a break. Because I think Mark Twain said that when you hate somebody, he said, when you hate people, he said, half of them don't know and the other half don't care. So it's only you that is being in the turmoil of this hatred and this grudge. And so the mind-body stuff really kind of illuminated a lot of what I was, being exposed to as a Sunday school and Bible school kid. And because I did that when I was a little kid. And but anyway, it just led me to solutions, that helped me start to let go of the distortion from my past, and also that I was involved in, so that I could find this more central, solid place. And the breath is at the core of it. So the angel taught me that, and then my Tai Chi meditation teacher taught me that 20 years later. And so I started doing this stuff, and then I started trying to get all my relatives to do it. And they got to the point where it was like, when there was like a Thanksgiving or something, and they'd see me coming, they'd be like, oh no, here we go again. Because I was trying to push this stuff. And, but anyway, then what happened was my mom had to get an angioplasty. And it was just a routine procedure. And she asked us all to come back for the angioplasty. And what was weird about that was I found out later that she had actually had a heart surgery that was very, dangerous, like a year before, but she didn't tell anybody. And she didn't ask any of us to come back. But for this routine angioplasty, she called all of us and asked us if we'd be willing to come. And, she didn't try to scare us or anything. She just said, it'd be nice if you came. And so I wasn't going to go. And then my wife overheard the conversation, and she was already booking the tickets. She wasn't going to, because we were busy. We had 2 kids, and I wasn't going to go. But my wife, she just made it happen. She just knew it had to happen. And so anyway, so we went, and so we're all sitting there. My dad and my siblings, we're all sitting there in the waiting room. Just having, kind of chatting, having fun. We knew that we were all going to go out for lunch as soon as the doctor told us the procedure was over. And we hadn't seen each other for a while. And we had a new son, a year old, and so anyway, the night before her angioplasty, I went and saw her in her room, and I'm so glad I did, because I almost didn't, because I was just going to see her after it was over the next day, because we'd just gotten in. And anyway, I had a copy of the Tao Te Ching, the Chinese book of Taoist poetry, and Taoism is like the philosophy of Tai Chi and Qigong. It's the poetic philosophy of Tai Chi and Qigong, life philosophy. And so anyway, I gave it to her, because she was bored in her hospital room. And I said, you can have a look at this if you want to, tonight, and then I'll get it back from you tomorrow. And so anyway, I gave it to her. So then the next morning, we're all in the waiting room, and the doctor comes in, takes down his mask, and he said, she didn't make it. Oh. And man, what was really striking about that was there was this wave of sorrow that went around the room. And then it finished with me. I was sitting on the arm of the chair, the sofa that my dad was sitting on. And me and my dad, we didn't have a real touchy-feely kind of relationship. I have tremendous respect and love for the guy, but I had to learn all this over time. But at the time, we didn't have a real close relationship in that way. But anyway, that wave came around the room. It was like person after person was collapsing, just weeping. And then it came around to me and my dad, and I just grabbed him, And I just started kissing his bald head, and I just said, it's okay, because he said, he broke down and he said, oh God, he said, Jesus, take care of her. And I said, it's okay. She's with Jesus, And so anyway, then after that happened, one of my sisters said, did you feel that? And I said, what, And she said, Mom's spirit. She said, Mom's spirit came through all of us. And once she said that, I remembered how that went around the room like that. And then to me and my dad. And then I just felt this incredible need to comfort him. And I think it was her instead, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
So anyway, so then years later, I started teaching Tai Chi in meditation, and because I never planned to teach it, it was just for my own personal healing. And I started. So what happened right after she passed away? My sisters went into her room to collect her things, and they found the copy of the Tao Te Ching that I'd given her, and right in the front of it was a note. And she had a premonition that she wasn't going to survive that, and so she'd written a note, and she'd written notes to each one of us. And the one that she wrote to me was that I wish I could go back a few years and study the arts of relaxation that Junior was trying to teach me. That's what they called me. And man, that just, when I saw that note, it just like welded in my brain. And long story short, what this eventually led to was I wrote me and my wife wrote the Complete Idiot's Guide to Tai Chi and Qigong. And it was published in 4 different languages around the planet. And we had this idea that we put in the back of that book called World Tai Chi Day. And it wasn't a reality at that point, but we just knew that it was going to be. And we ended up creating this mass Tai Chi and Qigong event here in Kansas City at the Nelson Atkins Art Museum, 200 people all doing Tai Chi in front of this gorgeous museum. And CNN picked it up. And then this thing just started spread. I mean, it was a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but it just started spreading like a wildfire, because it doesn't matter how much work we put into it. If it wasn't supposed to happen, it wouldn't have happened. All that work wouldn't have happened. But it just spread. It was like people all over the planet realized that it was time to get this stuff out on a larger scale to the public. because the public needed it. And so people in like Egypt and Iran and Hong Kong and, Africa, different African countries, South America, Brazil, these people were creating these huge events with like thousands of people in some cases and getting national and international media coverage. And we realized as we went back and looked at all the media coverage that we'd gotten, because what we did was we taught the teachers how to get media coverage. And then we also taught them how to, we gave them all the medical research, the scientific research on mind body, because if people knew about it, they'd be doing this stuff. And so we taught them how to spread that to the public. And we went back and looked at the media that we got, and we reached over 1 billion potential media viewers and readers from staging these events all over the planet. And it was all organic grassroots. It's not like I direct what they do in Iran or China or Brazil or whatever. These people just had this feeling that, we need to do this, and, and a lot of them, it was like, this looks like fun. But for other people, it was like, this could change the planet, And then we got later, when we can get into this, but we got some information from a Princeton University born conscious science project that found out that we had changed global consciousness.
That's what I want to show next. That's what I was going to ask, if it's time for, here, I'm uploading up.
Well, while you're doing that, one thing I wanted to mention is, when I throw this out, this huge, extraordinary consciousness experience, it wasn't like that. When these things happen, when these things come into our mind, they're like little things and they seem insignificant, and the world can make us feel like it is insignificant. And then we forget that we ever had the experience. So what happened with me was I started writing my experiences down, because I had a big experience. I went through a period where I lost my mother, father, and son in about 1.5 years. And then I had an extraordinary consciousness experience. And Alan Watts, if anybody doesn't know Alan Watts, go on YouTube, listen to him. But he had extraordinary consciousness experiences. And he said that it's real common for them to happen after your life hits rock bottom, because then you're wide open. Now, you don't have to hit rock bottom to get wide open. You can use meditation to get wide open. So we don't have to wait until that tragedy. But I just want to tell everybody, these little experiences that we're having, you may not think that it's important, but it may be. It may be huge and important. So just write it down and keep coming back to it and write about it more, because a lot of times these experiences are like exploding files on your computer. So a disk can't handle, back when we had disks, a disk couldn't handle the amount of information that was the program. It could only put something in there that would unfold it on your hard drive. And these kind of experiences, that's what they are. It's like we get these kind of things implanted that are way bigger than we can conceive of. Just like a 6 or 7 year old kid had no idea what that angel was teaching when he taught a breathing exercise. But then 20 years later, a Tai Chi and meditation teacher said, "Oh, this is what it is, Bill." You see what I mean?
Yes.
And so we see
that. Well, I had a spiritually transformative experience after 2 weeks of working on myself, and I was just surrendered. I mean, at that point, it's like, what else because when you're looking at all the programming that you want, that you realize that the movie that you're a star in, and the other players in it, if one leaves and you bring in the same person, or it's almost the same person in for the next role, and it's like, no, I don't want that. But until you choose something different, you have to be something different.
Yeah, it was like when people get in abusive relationships and then keep having one after the other. Yeah. And I think that's the power of mind body practices, is like you were alluding to earlier, is that the practice of just letting go. And in the Tao Te Ching, there's a great line. It says, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be."
Right. Well, that's it. The other thing I wanted to bring up that I mentioned to you before we came on is the power of focus. That this opportunity for doing a body, mind, spirit practice, whether it's Qigong or Tai Chi or yoga, whatever practice that you choose, but a practice that allows you to really focus, where what happens is the focus expands Calvin Chin teaches meditation. He used to be a TM guy, and he says in his class he talks about picture a bucket of golf balls inside a bucket like you'd get at the range inside a football stadium. And when you are in your normal state, you are that bucket. That's your consciousness, all those golf balls that's there. But when you're in this expanded state through meditation or breath and movement, you are the stadium.
Yeah.
And when you're the stadium, your perspective, your judgments, your loves and likes and all of those things are flexible. They you see them from both sides. You don't have to protect yourself. There's not as anywhere near as much fear. It's a whole different experience, right?
Yes, yes, and the science is validating, everything that you just said. What I've found is it's when we go into alpha state, and that's what meditation, mindfulness, qigong, tai chi, and yoga are all proven to be able to do, is to take the brain into alpha state. And what alpha state is it's that drift of consciousness where you're not thinking in words and you're not in control, but where you just kind of drift into a reverie. My grandson used to do it all the time, and my son and daughter-in-law and his sister, they would say that he was sleeping with his eyes open when he was really little. He'd do that, and he just, you'd see his eyes, and you'd know that he was just. It was like he was everywhere and yet nowhere at the same time, and he looked, quite pleasant, and that's what happens when we go into alpha state. It's that state right before we go to sleep, because beta brain waves is the busy brain waves, and then theta is the first sleep state, and delta is the deep sleep, really deep sleep state. But when we go from the busy brainwave state down to that first sleep state, we pass through alpha state. And so alpha state is that state where you're not asleep yet, but you're just out of control and you're just drifting. And what these ancient meditative techniques, time-tested meditative techniques, the big five, what they're all designed to do is to help us get into that state where we let go of control. The Chinese call it song. The Chinese masters call it song or sung, where you let go mentally, emotionally, and physically. You just let go. And then the brain goes into that alpha state. And when we go into that alpha state, what happens is that's when we merge with our connection to everything. Right. And so in the University of Virginia, I was just talking to one of the professors there, and they started bringing people in and teaching them how to do mind-body meditative practices because she started doing it in her with her patients. And then her patients started reporting having extraordinary consciousness experiences. So then they did a formal study and they taught a whole bunch of people how to do mind-body. And they found that over 50% of those people, as they practiced the mind-body practices, started reporting extraordinary consciousness experiences. So that could be anything from, prescience to, remote viewing, or precognition, like when you think of somebody and then the phone rings and it's them and those kind of things. And it's really exciting to see the science.
Well, I think also what you find is that once you realize that you can get into that state, you actually use that time right before you go to sleep in a whole different way. Yeah. So that's what Einstein did, is he would take little mini naps. He'd go to a calculation, he'd get stuck, and then he'd just, okay, I'm just going to release it, take a little mini nap, and he'd wake up with the answer. Because when you tap into the big field of information rather than our little field, I mean, it's almost like a radio dial, and we're an antenna. And until we get to that, we get to our space where we have access to the other field that knows everything. Yeah,
Tesla did that. Tesla did that too. Yeah. He would get his answers. Well, in fact, what Tesla claimed was that he would put a pad and a paper, a pen and a pad next to his bed, and then when he'd go to sleep, and then when he'd wake up in the morning, there would be answers in his writing to what it was that he was, seeking the answers for. And as you look at this stuff and the science and also the experience of it, because when we let go, it's like we connect with the larger existence. And one of the things that was really beautiful was Dr. Roger Nelson. He was the director of research at the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory for 20 years. And he ended up founding a research project that grew out of that called the Global Consciousness Project, which is what found that World Tai Chi Day had changed global consciousness during that 24-hour period. And he said that the most exciting and enjoyable part of his 20 years of collecting data on how consciousness affects global consciousness is that they found that when there were events that were, they categorized them as healing, connection, compassion events. So World Tai Chi and Qigong Day, World Yoga Day, World Peace Meditation Day, all these things fell into that category and many more. And what they found was that when we're in those states, when there's a global event, and it doesn't have, like World Tai Chi Day at the time when they measured it, I think we only had maybe tens of thousands of people, and in a population of 7 billion people, that's a little tiny speck of people, but we changed the whole global consciousness. And he said that what he loved about the data was that it showed that these connection, healing, compassion events more powerfully affected global consciousness than times of tragedy and despair. And so that really bodes well for the future of humanity. And so what happens is we connect with the larger whole. And then, like you say, we start to see things from different angles. And then the other thing that happens is what science found is that when we practice these meditative states on a regular basis, the empathy and compassion parts of the brain get physically larger. They get physically larger. So it's not like we just get nicer. The parts of our brain that are responsible for empathy and compassion, they get physically larger, and the fear and stress parts of the brain get physically smaller. And so a lot of the stress stuff that we're dealing with, by going into that state of coherence on a daily basis, Harvard says that you'll get the huge benefits of meditation if you do a 30-minute a day meditation practice. Now, I wasn't a good practicer, but I did have periods in my life where I was really motivated, where I became a very good practitioner. Just like you said that you had experiences after, you had like several weeks, 2 or 3 weeks of practice. And so if you pick this stuff up and make it a life habit, you'll have periods where you drift away from it, and then you'll come back to it because you feel better when you're doing it. And then you'll have periods where you get pretty dedicated for a while, and then you'll have other experiences that'll make you want to come back and keep doing it. So it'll always be part of your life once you do it. I mean, I drift away. I've had, during the lockdowns and the pandemic, I went through a horrible period in my personal life. All of a sudden, all my Tai Chi and meditation classes, the doors just slammed. There was nothing.
Wow.
And for all we knew, that was the way it was going to be for the rest of our lives. And so, what we built our whole life was just over, just like that. And so I went through a kind of a dark period at that time, because I did what a lot of people did. I sat at home. I wasn't having classes. I sat at home and I was watching the news, just watching the news all day long. And I got to a point where it just fried me. And so what I did was I just walked away from it. And I had been collecting all this mind-body science for many years, decades. And so when I walked away from the media, I just spent that time meditating and getting centered and sitting in nature. And then that brought me back to this book, which is the new second edition of the Gospel of Science. And I just poured myself into it. And then reading this science that was validating what I was going through after I turned off the corporate media. And I'm not a fan of ignorance. I'm at the point now where I do tune in, but YouTube has great independent journalists.
Right.
Award-winning journalists. And I actually get into this in the new second edition of the Gospel of Science, of how media is shifting and, these kind of realities, and how and how people are finding a flow. They're always looking for truth. People are always looking for truth. And I have a lot of faith in humanity. All the science gives me great faith in humanity. It's just that the media, government, the institutional structures are falling apart. And what's happening, one of the things that's happening is we're losing our false idols. So, this news person or that politician or that CEO of that big company that we used to kind of think was like the coolest person on the universe, that was really smart because they were smart about one thing. We thought they were smart about everything. And so all these false idols are starting to fall apart. And the good thing about that is it's bringing us back to our center, and our center is in here, and it's our connection with other human beings, just on a day-to-day basis. And I always tell people in my classes, if I meditate before I go into a store, it's like I'll have a human experience with the person on the other side of the counter. Whereas I might have just walked in there and just kind of looked at them like a cash register I had to hand my money to. But if I take that moment to get centered before I go in there, and then like I had a really beautiful experience a few years ago. I was going into a convenience store, and there was a couple of people in line in front of me, and I was just standing there, and I had meditated before I went in, and I actually had done a class that morning. And so I was in a really good space, and there was a Beatles song. There was a Beatles song on playing on the radio. And so when I got up to the cashier, as I was standing there waiting, I just kind of thought there's this little old lady sitting behind this counter, who's going to take my money, right? But then, I'm listening to the song, and when I get up there, I go, "Oh, I love the Beatles." And she goes, "Oh, you like the Beatles?" She goes, "I love the Beatles." She said, "When I was 16, George Harrison played at the Cow Palace, this big concert hall, and there were no chairs, so everybody sat on the floor back in those days. And so my friends had saved us a place right up there near the stage. And so I was working my way through the crowd to get up there, and I stumbled and fell down in front of the stage. And she said, George Harrison saw me fall, and he stopped playing, and he stepped down and helped me up. And then after he helped me up, then he just started playing again. And it was just really beautiful. And I would not have had that experience if I would have been in that busy brainwave state,
Right.
where we're always behind and we're always rushing, and everything's a crisis and everything's the end of the world,
Yeah, yes. I love the fact that you're giving us a different perspective of how we can be, and how the shutdown period allowed us to work through our fear of death, if we had it, and our persona. If our identity was with our work, then we had to work on our identity without the work, or what it would look like with new work. So I think that in hindsight it will be wonderful, but I don't
I think another
anybody really.
Another thing that came out of the pandemic, as I'm looking back, is we all just realized how much we enjoy being around other human beings because we were denied that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yes. And man, I remember when things first started lifting and opening back up again, people were just giddy. When I'd see people at the stores, they were just giddy to be hanging around with other people. Everybody had a real closeness. Now, there was kind of a post-traumatic stress thing that came out of that as well. And so then over time, I started seeing that start to rear its head. I actually saw, me and my wife, we almost saw a couple of fistfights in parking lots. It's like I'm a real observer of society. And part of it's, I guess, teaching mind body stuff. And I was a sociology major too in school. But anyway, so I'm always just kind of watching the vibe of the society. And so I saw that giddiness where people were just so happy to be with each other. But then the post-traumatic stress of what we went through came through, and then then we went through that wave. But now I do think that that realization of how sacred other people are in our lives, just any strangers, everybody that we run into. I think that was a good thing that came out of that.
Yeah, I think we'll find so many things. It woke a lot of people up. It got a lot of people off of the news, and got people to actually question. A lot of people call this reality we're in is an inverted matrix, where you can't figure out what's right and what's wrong, what's true, what's not true. And so that's actually been a good thing, because it allows us to co-create with the universe at a really high level once we decide to. So
well, I think that was one of the things that I was talking about the losing false idols, because I think looking back on it, I think what we did was, we just kind of grew up thinking that Walter Cronkite's going to figure everything out.
That's right.
And I can just leave everything up to Walter Cronkite, and then eventually it became Wolf Blitzer or Rachel Maddow or Sean Hannity or, you know what I'm saying? The list just goes on and on and on. But we started to realize, it was like the $20,000 suits and the $200,000 sets really made us feel like there was real wisdom being offered from that, or from the chambers of government or whatever.
Or the same thing with government. You figured they had more data, but
yes.
they realized that they have more data, but they probably haven't read any of it, and they hardly show up for voting. And it's all about follow the money.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you go, oh, this is just a different form of feudalism. I thought we were.
Yeah, we've actually seen legislation where the wording of the legislation was exactly the same as the memo that the representatives got from some corporation that was lobbying them.
I know, that's horrible.
Yeah, and so, but I think that's all of the mass awakening, and so I feel like we're in the midst of a huge global awakening, and so what we're trying to do with the mind body stuff is to facilitate that, because people are letting go of their false idols, and they're looking for, an ability to return to that kind of core central place. And it's the same place we were when we were really young children, when we weren't frightened of the world and everything was possible, and everything was shiny and everything was interesting. And that's what the mind body stuff does, is it leads us back to that place. And then the threads will lead us to information and truth, but it won't be the old establishments. So all the old establishments are falling apart. Now, for people that I know that are gripping onto the old establishments, that want to believe in the structures and things and people that aren't real, it's a horrific experience for them. But what I keep telling them is, if you just let go of all that and just understand that structures have to fall apart when they're not functioning correctly, and then there's space, and then and if you practice the mind body, you get into that safe space, and you realize that the universe is really quite safe. And that's where, the science has led me to just some extraordinary stuff. Adam Curie, he was in the Paralabs at Princeton, and he talked about an unpublished study that they did. And so I got all this while we were collecting this for the new second edition of the Gospel of Science. But then also we started a monthly discussion series. If you go to globaltransformationproject.org, you can register for the monthly discussion series. We bring scientists on. But anyway, Adam Curie, I became aware of him and his work at the Paralabs at Princeton from a documentary that I saw, which is really fascinating documentary. It's called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. Dr. Stephen Greer produced it. And but anyway, in that, Adam Curie talks about an unpublished study that they did at Paralabs. And they had a square room, and they put a random event generator controlled grow light in the center of it. So random event generator means it'll go to all four corners randomly. And if you look at it long enough, it's going to be 25% approximately in every corner, because that's statistical odds. If you didn't have statistical odds, you wouldn't have any casinos in the world. There would be no lights would be on in Vegas. They have to have that. And so that's a reality. But what they found was they put a living plant in that square room in one of the corners. And what happened, and Adam Curie was like gleeful when he was talking about this. It was so beautiful. But he said that what they found was that the light disproportionately kept going back to the corner where the living plant was that needed the sustenance of that grow light. And, and again, like Roger Nelson said, he said that when human minds come together in states of healing, compassion, and connection, that's when the consciousness is the most powerful. And when we go into these states, that's when the body heals. That's when the DNA heals, the DNA expression, the immune function, the heart, the lungs, the brain, everything, and all this is backed up by mountains of science. The only reason that we're not hearing about all this science is because, and I talk about this in my Tai Chi and meditation classes almost every day. And that is, the reason you don't hear about this stuff is because the only thing you're going to see on TV is what's going to make somebody billions of dollars. And Tai Chi and meditation teachers and organizations, they're not in it to make billions of dollars. They're in it to offer people something that will transform not only our lives, but our society as a whole and our whole planet, right, and the future of humanity. And so I tell them, that's the only reason you're not hearing about it. It's not that this science isn't world altering, personally, on a health level, a mental, emotional, and physical health level, but also on a societal level and on an economic level. And
well, I think there is a push that's coming through with the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden, where they're really putting more into the mind-body connection and getting people to meditate. So I think that this train can't be stopped. I really think that what you started years ago, 20 years ago, where you had the insight to build this beautiful event, the World Tai Chi and Qigong Day event in April. It's April 29th this year. But I think what you've started, it can't be stopped. We're waking up to a new reality.
Well, we're moving into a new level that I think you'll find really exciting. So the culmination of all this science in the new second edition of Gospel of Science, and then realizing that World Tai Chi Day had changed global consciousness, and that got into the book. So all that's in the book. And what it led to is this realization that mind-body practice should be part of public education.
Right.
Because it significantly increases your IQ. When you practice these things, you get rid of all that mental clutter. You're able to think more clearly, and they can actually measure. It makes our IQ higher. It improves our GRE reading score, our math proficiency skill, our verbal fluency, all the things that we want students to be able to do. It does. And so it's when you look at this science, you think it's crazy that this stuff isn't already a core part of public education, because we're trying to get kids to learn, and learning all starts right here with the brain. And so so we launched the Global Transformation Project, globaltransformationproject.org, and everybody can go there and sign our petition. And when we get 100,000 signatures, what we're going to do is we're going to approach every United Nations mission on the planet. Now, I know a lot of people, when they hear UN, they think of the UN bureaucracy and all the distortion and everything. But we're not going to go through the bureaucracy. We're going to take this to the people. We're going to contact every individual UN mission in every country on the planet. And we know that we can do this because in 2015, the UN General Assembly passed the resolution creating the International Day of Yoga. And it was for the very same reasons that we're pushing to get mind-body practice in public education. It was for global harmony and global health. And so that's the same science that for this. And so so you had mentioned Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, and Joe Dispenza. And there's other ones, Russell Brand, John Kabat-Zinn. What we're doing is we're reaching out. If any of those folks or anybody that has connections with those folks is listening to this, reach out to them and get them to go to the globaltransformationproject.org, globaltransformationproject.org, because what we're seeking to do is to build an unprecedented global mind-body coalition, getting all these people to get people to sign this petition. Really what we want to do is we want to take millions of signatures to these United Nations missions and get this thing passed. Now, it wouldn't, we've written this very carefully. It wouldn't be mandatory. What it is to use the UN as a vehicle to educate public educators all over the planet about what these things can do for their students. And from our experience, if they read the science, they're going to want to do it. And so no country would have to participate in this. Even if they voted for it, they wouldn't have to participate in it. No school would have to participate in it, and no student would have to participate in it, because over these last 40 years, we've taught in prisons, public schools, all kinds of situations. And anytime there's a captive audience, we always say there has to be an opt-out. So the student has to be able to go to a study hall or something if they don't want to do it. Okay. Now, having said that, hardly anybody ever opts out. Right. And the ones that opt out are really sorry they did when they come back into the class, because everybody in the class is like, wow, you know what I mean? And so it's a real pleasant experience. You know, they all enjoy it and they all get great benefit from it. Bullying rates go down. And what this would do, if we could get this into public education, it would save the planet trillions of dollars, not just once, every year. year after year after year. This is all solid science. Go to globaltransformationproject.org to see all the science. And the reduction in health costs and social costs is profound. And so, and there's also research now that over the last 30 years or so that shows when you get 1% of a city's population to go into high level meditation, it brings down the violent crime rates by as much as like 25%. Just 1%. Just 1% change in the brainwaves of the whole culture. And so imagine there's like 1.2 billion public school children on the planet right now. Oh. Imagine if 1.2 billion more human minds were going into this alpha state on a daily basis, because what we're suggesting is an hour a day. It'd be like a hybrid of PE, health science. Mm-hmm. Every kid would be learning yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, and mindfulness, because they all have massive science. You'll see at the website. And so then we'd be educating kids at a whole higher level. It'd be a paradigm shift for education. But at the same time, we'd be saving future health costs and future social costs. The prison population would start to empty. And then the other thing that happens too is when we go into these states, it increases the size of the empathy and compassion parts of the brain. And then those brains are rippling this out through the global psyche. Mm-hmm. And we know that the science shows that would change the psyche of the whole planet. We would have a more compassionate, empathetic planet. And if we had greater empathy for other nations, wars would stop happening. Because the reason wars happen is because countries won't hear what the other country is trying to say. You know, if the other country is trying to say, look, that scares us. You can't put that missile right there pointed at us. That scares us. You can't do that. We don't do that to you. We don't put a missile right on your border and point it right at you. Right. But you have to have empathy. That's the only way you can negotiate, you know, and the only alternative to not negotiating is war. That's the and you know, we just can't do that anymore.
There's a lot of people that are working towards education reform. So after this, I'll connect you with some people too that might be a good match with what you're doing, because we are going into the Aquarian age, and the Aquarian age is about love and peace. And we have to go do the inner work, because we're all in this together. This is not, don't point. Well, when you point a finger, 3 fingers are back at you.
That's right. That's right.
So, Bill, can I show the slideshow real quick for you?
Yeah, please do. Yeah, I'll comment when
people. Okay.
Yeah, you can put any of them up. I'll talk about them as they come.
I'm going to put. I made them into a deck.
Okay.
So I'll show you. Okay. So here was what I used for the front.
Oh yeah, and that's my granddaughter down there. That's her. That's her showing my son-in-law's mother how to do Tai Chi when she was like about 4 years old or something like that.
Oh, is that cool?
Yeah,
I love that picture.
Yeah, I was showing her Tai Chi, and I didn't think she was paying attention, you know, because like 3-4 year olds are bouncing all over the place. And then she went on a trip to Alaska with her maternal grandparents and her, you know, of course, my daughter and her son, my son-in-law. And anyway, they all went fishing, and she had to stay with her grandmother, her other grandmother. And she said, Grammy, she said, I can show you how to do Tai Chi. And she started doing that. And she said, you breathe in, you breathe out. And so her other grandmother took this photo and sent it to me. And so then I put it in here. Yeah.
Isn't that great? Well, see, that's what I'm saying, is that it is innate. Once you start doing some of this stuff, it feels good, because it's almost a remembering.
Yeah, kids resonate to it. They resonate to it. This is not a hard lift. And what World Tai Chi and Qigong Day taught us personally is that mind-body teachers are in every country, in every major city around the planet. So it's all in place. Right. You know, it's like since the Beatles went to meditate with Maharishi, meditation started spreading, and then people from China and India came and spread it and spread it and spread it. And now we're at a place where mind-body teachers are all over the planet. We have the science. All we got to do is take them into public schools.
Right. Perfect. Okay. So this is the first slide.
Yes, that's World Tai Chi Day. And this was in 2007, they were observed during the 24-hour period. And you see this 0 line in the middle. That's where the statistical odds are. Because what this is like an electronic coin flipper. These computers around the planet are flipping a coin 200 times per second. And so like Vegas, you know, they would know it might diverge a little, but it's going to stay around that 0 line. But then what happens, they found, is that when groups of people go into coherent states of consciousness together, it sets it off. So you see it starting to go off towards the bottom in the early hours. So this is when World Tai Chi Day is starting in Australia and Asia. But then at about 10 a.m., that's when it hit. And see, at that time, most of the World Tai Chi and Qigong Day events were in Europe and North and South America. And so here you see it just taken off like a rocket up towards the upper right corner. And that was really Dr. Nelson from Princeton, when he was explaining this, he said that was like a huge indication when it started going up off like that. And so this shows that when we go into these coherent states of consciousness, it spreads that coherence through the whole population. And I did a presentation at Princeton, or not Princeton, Folsom Prison many years ago. And one of the inmates had been keeping statistics. They'd had a meditation Tai Chi Chuck program there for 2 years. During that 2 years, behavior rates had improved, not just for the 50 or 60 people in the Tai Chi Chug group, but for the whole prison at Princeton. I mean,
Wow.
At Folsom.
So, so is the blue line the content, or is it the red?
Yeah. What the blue line represents is the probability score.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's how much it so what P equals 0.05 means. These physicists explained. They helped me with this when I was writing the book. I didn't understand all this, but what it means is the percentage of chances that it could have happened by random chance.
Oh, okay.
And so what this P05 means is there was a 1 in 20 chance that this could have been random. So 19 out of 20 chance that we affected global consciousness. And I always tell any doubters, if Vegas had a blackjack table that gave you 19 to 1 odds that you were going to win, people would spend their whole lives waiting in lines to get to that blackjack table. But what happened is when they started looking at all the things, when they started looking at World Yoga Day, World Peace Meditation Day, and then they put all that data together, the more data they looked at, the stronger the P score got. Now, that wouldn't be true if it was random. If these things were random, it would go the other way. Yeah. But it gets to the point where when they look at all the data on this stuff, one of the researchers said that you would have to spend 1,000 lifetimes counting to get to the number of possibility that their data was chance. Wow. 1,000 lifetimes of counting. That's how slim the possibility is that this stuff is just chance.
Okay. So the other thing I want to say is that you can see the build. It had to go. It's an energy wave, right? So
yes.
So it had to build to get here, right? So
each one is different in how they do it, but what shows them that we created a greater coherence is the divergence away from the zero line. So, like for example, for Tai Chi and Qigong, there's this thing that you experience where you kind of you let go into the flow or the meditation, and it doesn't happen instantly. It kind of takes it a little while, and then it takes off, and then you drift into it. So that was our experience. But for World Yoga Day, it was more it kind of went up and then went down. But they had the same. I think they had the same P score for World Yoga Day as P05. But it was a different departure from the norm. Okay. And then there was a World Peace Meditation Day, and theirs just went up and off like that. And but they were all similar divergences. So from a scientific perspective, it wasn't they weren't different from each other, but you can see differences in the way that it expresses the divergence. They call it divergence from norm.
Okay. So I'm going to go to the next one.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, see, there's World Yoga Day. And so, see, this one's different, but it still has the divergence. So right. Ours diverge down and up, and there's.
So what I had mentioned to you before too is how chaotic our environment is right now, mm-hmm. and what this allows you to do is focus, and so you can see that it may not be as easy. The first one's 2007. This is 2015. And we're just being with the internet and knowing about every terrible thing, that's what the news is every terrible thing that happens everywhere.
Yeah.
It's harder is it harder to do it now?
Well, well, coming through the pandemic, people are still, in the lockdowns, people are dealing with a lot of stuff. But it's from my local classes, the perception that I get is that people are a lot more hungry to try to find center. But it is very challenging. It is very challenging for people to meditate. So the way that I always approach it is I always tell people, you just play at this. Just look at it like a game to play and let it, when you catch yourself stressing out, just play with that, taking in a big breath and just letting your brain and your body just sigh and drift. And then when you open your eyes, just look how beautiful the sky is and feel how beautiful it feels to feel yourself breathe and feel your shoulders relax. And, so just doing that. And so I feel like we're, it's like that, the Chinese word for crisis is made of two characters. One is danger and one is opportunity. So the danger side of what we're going through is that, there is a lot of stress and a lot of turmoil. And like I said, part of that is all the false idols are falling apart. The positive side of it is that people are starting to try to find reality, trying to find a deeper truth. Because there was a time when I used to watch those shiny, sparkly commercials on TV, and I thought that was reality. I thought, I'm supposed to, work real smart, and I'm supposed to own one of those cars, and then I'll probably have a girl that looks like that girl sitting in the passenger seat in that car with the shiny diamonds on, and I just thought that was all real. And, but when you really get centered and you start to really pay attention to what's real, no, what's real is just how sacred that person is, like Kathy Mason that I'm talking to right now.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? It just, all the veils fall away.
Oh yeah. And that there is a beautiful symphony of energies that are running, that are natural to our environment, that we can be in harmony with. Whereas the other is an overlay that isn't necessarily in harmony at all with nature. And I mean, that's what the ancients knew. They knew how to work with how this whole invisible works. And hopefully that's what we're going back to. So
and going and getting back into nature is really important too. Harvard's actually done research on this. They call it nature therapy. So spending time in nature, and then when we go into meditative state, that's connecting with nature, because we're nature. And so when we let go, let go, just feel things, feel breath, feel letting go, and practice that 20, 30 minutes a day. And you can learn counting meditations. There's a ton of stuff on YouTube. But one of the things, just real quick, is the other thing I would recommend in my classes is get away from corporate media, especially corporate news, because it's all fear-based. And I get into this in the new second edition of the Gospel of Science. I have a section towards the back. Most of the book's about mind-body science and the promise and the incredible promise of all this stuff once we, get everybody to realize that it's that the science exists. But getting away from that fear-based media, and trying to find information-based media. And YouTube's great for this, just like programs like yours. It's, they can change our lives. And so, getting away from that fear-based media. It doesn't teach you anything. I went to see Ram Dass at the Disneyland Hotel decades ago. And he encouraged everybody to take media vacations. He said, if you turn on the news once a week, you're going to be completely caught up, because they go over the same thing over and over and over again, especially corporate media. That's all they do. They just rehash the same points over and over and over again. But you can use YouTube and you can find really interesting things about consciousness and mind body, and also, how the world works, but you don't get it out of that little tiny squeezed perspective.
Right. Well, this is hopefully people are aware now that they have choices. Before, I think they were just robotically on their phone doing their stuff, and they really weren't aware of the bigger picture. And what you're offering with everything you do is an opportunity to experience life more fully, enjoy the ride, co-create with the universe at a high level. I highly recommend this book. I highly recommend you check out globaltransformationproject.org. I've been sharing it. And World Tai Chi Day is April 29th this year. And if you go to worldtaichiday.org, you can read more about it. And also, Bill, are those the two best ways? Because we have to wrap up here.
Yeah. Those are the two best sites, globaltransformationproject.org and worldtaichiday.org. And you can contact us through that. But I just wanted to mention real quick in this book, if anybody's dealing with any chronic health issues or challenges, and it could be mental, emotional, physical, whatever, read this book, because not only will it explain the science on the mind-body practices and how they can help your particular condition, but it'll also give you this tremendously positive vision of the future. And the science shows that our vision of future possibility is the biggest indicator of what our future possibility is going to be, health and personal well-being. So having a positive vision of what's possible, and this is all science-based, all this book, it's not my philosophy. It's all science that I've collected for 40 years that shows a really beautiful, magical, positive future that is just so tangible and so achievable. And a big part of it, what makes it happen, is as many of us as possible just letting go of the prison of our consciousness, and all this science will help you do that. And it changed me. Reading all this science over and over again, it changed me. It brought my practice to a whole different level, and the way that I look at the world and everything is just so much more positive and hopeful. And this book will do that for you too. And then I hope you'll share it, spread it with other people, because if we need to change the psyche and the vision of the future, and that's what these 40 years of research science in this book does.
It's a remarkable book. I lent it to somebody. I haven't gotten it back. So,
well, anybody that's read it, please go to Amazon and Goodreads and write a review, because I was doing an interview a few months ago, and a lady came on. She said, Bill, she goes, that's the most important book I've ever read in my life.
Right.
And I said, oh, God, thank you so much for telling me that. I said, would you go to Amazon and write a review? That's been months. She never wrote the review. If I read a book that's the most important book in my life, I'm going to write a review. I will write a lot of reviews about it.
Yeah. Well, people, we're in a time of huge change, and you can really look to the truth tellers, the people that are showing you the way. They're using the light in the tunnel to the next level. And Bill Douglas is one of those visionaries that I just hope that you follow his work and put energy and love towards his work, because you'll see this is the journey that we signed up to be on right now. And there's so many ways that you can serve. You can just be an observer and watch it, but you can also, without having to fight for anything, you can just be a positive support energetically and financially towards these different changes that you'll see. It's happening. I'm getting chills. It's happening.
Every time you meditate, you're changing the future of humanity. And we could definitely use donations at globaltransformationproject.org. World Tai Chi Day, Global Transformation Project, we've paid for all these with volunteers and out of our own pocket. We've never asked anybody for any membership fees or anything, because we wanted it to just grow just as fast as it could.
Yeah.
And but donations would really help us expedite this. And it's going to be expensive when we start contacting all the UN missions in the world. Postage, international postage is pretty expensive.
Well, I'm afraid we have to go. We're over time. But thanks, Bill. We'll do this again. Thank you. I got to talk to you last year. Let's not make it so long.
Yeah.
Between times to talk.
Well, I love your show. I love talking to you, because you just have this just curiosity and open-mindedness, and it's really, I personally find it, just kind of healing being on your show.
Oh, thank you. Well, I really want people to realize how powerful they are, and that they have the opportunity to really create a life worth living.
And the mainstream culture, it makes us feel small and insignificant. Write down your experiences, write down your views, write down your visions, write down your hopes, all these things, honor who you are, because God knows where it'll take you.
Yes. Well, we're magical co-creators. That's the whole reason we're here. So play with it. Have some fun. Don't feel like you're a victim of everything. See the opportunity and change, and see how you can ride the wave on top with a surfboard rather than be drowned inside the wave trying to fight it. You ride it and have some fun. So thank you, everyone, and please share this if you feel this will help others. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel and go look at this on Roku TV and Amazon Fire TV. Thank you all. Bye
Thank you,
bye.
Kathy.